Welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast where a few friends get together each week with our individually contemplated story elements, randomly selected, and tell you a story. We used to be enemies, but now we are fast friends. We are thick as thieves. I am Reed.
I'm Levi.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Now, this is episode 2 of a story started last week called Crusader Metal Gods. And I really think what you should do, if you haven't listened to that, is that you should pause this and go back and listen to the first episode.
Good idea.
But now, since some of you probably didn't do that, we'll just explain that this is a story that starts out with some crusaders, crusader warriors, washed up on a beach after a shipwreck. There's 18 of them. There's a duke and a couple of his barons, 12 men-at-arms, 3 archers, and 12 horses that are scattered around the beach. And they've sent some guys off to get the horses. But while they were kind of figuring out what was going on, I mean, they lost their heavy armor. You know, some of them even ditched their swords because they were not, afraid of not being able to keep their head above water until it got light so they could get on land. They were following, during the dark night, the crashing of the surf. They knew that there was something coming up. So they managed to get in the right direction, and some of them survived. Not everybody made it, but this is all that did. One small detail, there were no members of the ship's crew with them. They had abandoned ship early on. As soon as things started to break up, they kind of on the sly lowered a boat, and the ship's crew just, abandoned them. So they were left to their own devices. So they have no idea where they are. They're here on this beach, and they were observed. And a tentative sort of emissary from those that were observing them came forward. 3 members. Some interesting things about them. They didn't have any metal adornments of any kind. And one of the things that has started to become clear is that this is not a place where metal is in abundance. It is actually really, really a luxury to have any metal at all. There are no easily identifiable surface minerals that are easy to get at. And so unbeknownst to them at first, these crusaders, although some types of metal just seem to oxidize and almost disintegrate it completely, hardened steel and a few other things like that persist, and they're wealthy beyond imagining. And it's hard for them to get it because gems are really prevalent in this society. They're easy to come by, diamonds, big rubies, emeralds, but they don't have metal. So that's kind of it creates interesting economic questions. You could wreck an economy by just walking in with, unbelievable wealth.
A tin plate or something.
Yeah. And so there's that. There's a language barrier, but some of the words that were used appear to be, if not Latin, closely related to Latin. And the Duke and his barons and maybe a couple of others have had some education, so there's some following along. But there's a lot of hand gestures, and they produced food and water, so they could, guys have been on, yeah. So there's kind of like a relatively guarded friendliness about the interaction so far. One of the guys is they're not carrying weapons. One of the guys had a staff, and he seemed to be really alarmed by the horses and was kind of making incantations like he was warding something off that he was afraid might be magically evil. But there's this interaction. So this is how the story starts. And so as we go forward, I'm going to ask Levi and Seth to just flesh out a couple of ideas. Now, one of the things that I wondered, I want to introduce a few characters Seth, are you ready to talk about the wise old woman?
Yeah, I think I can get you something here. So, what I'm thinking of is the the wise old woman is maybe not, and maybe there can be a particular wise old woman, but to try to set up a little bit more, maybe with the society, or because I think last time we kind of set off with some of the magic system or the pantheon still kind of vague with kind of some hints of what our character did on the beach with the seeing the horses. And so what our wise old woman is it's part of the system that they have, and it is, how do you put it, so to have this ability, you'd have to be like, it doesn't really show up until after like 40 years old, and you have to be unmarried. So like a spintress, a spinster, is that what it's called? An old maid or a spinster, right?
Yeah.
And what it is then they get like an intuition, right? Or at least it seems like an intuition, right? More often than not, like, these people know where to dig for a well that isn't, where to find water to dig a well, or where kind of can sense some of the hardness of stone, or where they need to look for this. And so they've kind of caught on to this, and then it kind of plays itself out. Now, whether it's like a complete thing or not, but it seems to work, most of the time. And so these wise women, who then just collectively in their tribe or whatever are called, grandma or grandmother, right? Kind of become this kind of figurehead of kind of dictating some certain thing, almost like like the medicine woman or something. And one of the things that they do is they decide basically who's going to marry who's going, like what animals to keep, which animals to slaughter at slaughter time. They kind of, because of their intuitive, whatever craft, right? And so whatever, they've got this idea of kind of determining which kind of beasts fit into like what should be around, if that makes sense.
Oh, so that's why the horses
And so
would be weird.
they're very weird because I'm thinking that, like, if this is something that, like, okay, the shipwreck, perhaps this is something that maybe some other shipwreck things have, washed up here before, my mind was going to, like maybe like the Roman Colosseum, right? Where they're taking all those wild beasts to bring them to the Colosseum.
Oh, yeah.
So you're going to get, some of these other wild beasts. So I'm thinking it would, like, a lot of the beast structure has kind of like a wild tinge to it. There's a lot of, fearsome beasts, as it would be. And even that being in kind of an isolated case, and maybe, interbreeding with the local flora and fauna that are close enough, have kind of made, like, so if there was a lion, it might not be exactly like a lion, but maybe it's like kind of morphed into like this, leopard, like a snow leopard with a mane, right? I don't know. And so it's like types are the same, but then it's also, between wild happenings and then this kind of selective breeding to maybe hone down. But that's one of the things that they dictate. And so this new creature that is, so maybe any horse type creatures, maybe like zebras mixed with, ponies. And so it's kind of like this, kind of a beast of burden, but kind of like a donkey-ish kind of, very small, stocky animal, at best, but, wild. So these like larger war horses are very, very strange. And as they would see it, unkosher, or like way out of line for all the years that they've kind of honed that this is what should be.
Yeah. You'd think that.
And so that is our.
You'd think that a system. You think that a system that was like that they would have a reason and a purpose for everything they saw because the wise old woman had made a ruling on it, you know? So even
Yeah.
the men, while they were strange, were like, well, we understand men because women have made rulings on that. But then they see a horse, something that's larger than the beasts that they have, and it like turns into kind of almost a paradox. It's like I can't recognize that exists until the women have had a chance to make a ruling on what it is we're supposed to do with it or think about it.
Yeah.
Like if it's an approachable
Right.
beast, like this could be like, it's like it's bigger, it's better, like, right, it's something, it's got to be something, spiritual or something
Right.
mystical, like, the gods. I'm thinking there was like one of the explanations for centaurs, whether this is true or not, but would be from a primitive perspective. If you saw someone riding in on a horse, right, and they're in a saddle or they're, straddling it, one would see a horse and a person, right? And maybe not distinguish that the person was not also part of the horse.
Yeah.
Does that make
No,
sense?
that makes total sense.
Right. And so this thing that comes in and it's very different, like you said, it's like, this is a strange creature, like we haven't had the ruling. I don't know if we can approach it. This seems like something terrifyingly godlike or mystical, and so like not sure how to take it. And so I guess that would be kind of your wise old woman. And so if maybe a particular one that they meet in one of the villages or something, but that's kind of might explain some of their magic system. Again, these wise old women, they'd have to be, unmarried, as would say a maiden. And then any of that intuitive power that seems to then show up only happens once they're already old or past that, past a certain age.
One of the story elements that was on the list here was the unique creature, and I'm wondering if you've kind of got an. I see kind of a roadmap for going that direction, Seth.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to, I mean, if that works for unique creature, I mean, otherwise I can or maybe Levi wants to figure out what one of these particular beasts that, is kind of a unique thing. But unless like that, a broad range, all the creatures here are kind of unique to a certain point.
Well, I had an interesting idea for, just as a total aside, and Reed obviously as the master of ceremonies can tell me if I need to get out of the way. But I had an interesting idea for the for the fighting style and for the magic system a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
And it's not so much a magic system, but it kind of pairs with these wise old women and essentially what they're doing, right? Essentially what this intuition is doing. And it has to do with names, right? It has to do with the description of a thing. Because the someone's true name is not just that which they're called, but it is the full and complete understanding of who they are, right? And therefore you would be able to sort of put them in their proper place. Like if we think about in the Old Testament, when Adam was given to name all the animals, a lot of theory suggests that he was given to actually like describe their purpose, right? And that's partially what this magic system is. To some, the women aren't saying what the names are, but the intuition is the ability to perceive what the thing's purpose is, and that's one of the reasons why they're afraid, because it's like the description of the small zebra pony-like creature that they have describes it as not a beast of large size. And so they look at it and they're like, well, 4 legs, kind of longish face. It looks like a chubo, which is what we call our thing. But look at it, it's so huge. Like the name chubo brings forth the reality of something that is not taller than a man. Mm-hmm. But this thing, my head comes to its shoulder. So it kind of creates this dissonance with like, how do we treat this thing because we don't know its name? But that moved into my thoughts about the fighting style, which is that there's a saying in this world, and the fighting style of this world is how do I say this? Cut to the heart. It's the swift and quick action that undoes everything, right? Since since they don't have metal to any appreciable amount, the fighting style is like destroy, like get inside of the defenses as quickly as possible. And to accomplish this, you guys familiar with what a Prince Rupert drop is?
Not me.
Yes.
No.
So it's if you take and superheat glass and drop it into water, Reed,
Yeah.
you get like it looks like a drop,
Yeah.
but it's got a really long tail,
Okay.
right? And what happens is as the glass cools, because you're cooling it so quickly into water, the ball part of the drop compresses to an incredible degree, so much so that it can take tons of pressure and not break.
Cool.
Right? However, because of how that pressure is distributed, the thin tail part, if you can just clip it with a tweezer, and the whole thing shatters because it releases all the pressure throughout the whole thing.
Ooh.
And so this is kind of the fighting style. It's determine in your opponent their strong part and then find that one thing to cut their defenses and completely disable them, right? And in this way, a lot of duels are fought and no one dies. Because if a person is defending and his shield gets cut off of him, that's like he's like all his defenses are gone. Like it's such a shameful thing to be cut to the heart,
Yeah.
and so that introduction, then imagine the introduction of these crusaders who are used to a more brutal style of fighting and weapons that can sort of destroy shields. They don't need to like cut straps off of shields or off of breastplates. But I imagine they would sort of come up against people who like knew a lot of pressure points, knew how to like disable people very quickly. It's not a lot of brute force sort of. It's kind of the type of fighting where each person kind of circles each other for like 15 seconds or 30 seconds, which is kind of a long time. And then they come together and it's like a chess game playing out, where it's like, I'm going to punch high to try to attack this specific angle of his defenses. But because I saw how he walks, he's going to move like this. Therefore, I'm going to adjust this. And it's like this whole choreographed thing. And it looks kind of like dancing. Like when the Crusaders first see it, it looks kind of like dancing. But what it essentially is like a calculated categorizing of the person's defenses to defeat them with as little effort as possible,
Right.
with as little, just to try and find that key place that they can just get in and knock them out. And that's kind of the fighting style, and why it has to do with the whole name thing is because that's part of the intuition, right? This intuition power, and that's one of the reasons why the fighting style has grown up in here is because the women who possess this intuition and who also still retain some martial prowess, are just totally undefeated. Like they can have a guy run at them and they can move and just make it look like they're like bending down to pick up something off the ground and just kind of like moving around him because they understand exactly who he is and they can just see they can walk through a crowd and no one see them because they can intuit and understand as people's eyes are moving how to move through a crowd. And so this fighting style has arisen from that, and not everyone who uses the fighting style possesses that intuition power, but the women who both still have some form of martial prowess and have this are like undefeatable, just like you throw down your weapons in front of them because especially if they know your name.
Yeah.
Especially if they know your name, then like you might as well, if you're gonna try and fight, you might as well just stab yourself.
But they would know your name because they probably name every child in their village.
Exactly.
And I wonder if is there a calculation then not being too, as the Ents would say, who take all afternoon to tell you their name, from Lord of the Rings and Fanghorn Forest, you don't want to be too hasty in telling someone your name.
Right. Right.
And when you were saying that, a couple things, and not that some of it has to go this way, but this is where my mind went a little bit, because the kids were listening to some Tolkien on the way home today, so it comes from a couple things that one part that was from the book and another part with the name thing, right? So the one part with the name thing where in The Hobbit, where Bilbo is conversing with Smaug, right? And it's like, who are you? And it's like, and he's kind of like naming himself off of the things that he's done on this adventure, right? And perhaps that's like part of the thing. And so where my mind went with it was like, if there's like this fighting thing where they, like if someone was like, part of their name is this essence of something they've done, right? Which then it's like trying to poke a bit at where, like you said, the Rupert's drop, something that might seem very strong, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so if you kind of find where that strength is and where a weakness that might come out of that, right? So if something like, okay, this is a strong feat, but then, your weakness to that could be pride. And so if I can make an attack with you on your pride for having done that, I can bring you down.
Yeah.
Right. If I can, right, kind of attacking the weak point of that. And if they're sincere, right, then the attack doesn't mean anything, right? If they're truly not proud, right, for whatever this larger feat would be, right, then you can't attack that they're prideful and then take them down. The reason that one of the things I thought of that, because they were listening to the, the Children of Huron.
Yeah.
And it was like the end of the book, and I forget exactly what word he used, but it was like this thing, and I forget who it was because I only really caught the last little bit since I've been listening to it. But like this one guy had come back and he was like said that Tyrion had died, right? And so everyone is mourning, yada yada yada. But then he shows back up and he's kind of refuting this like slander that he's said against him, and he has this thing where he says, attack me with your slander, for you can wield no other weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like turning that into a weapon of some sort, where it's like taking that idea where it's like, if you have to try to find something with their name or their feats that are part of what they've done, and if you can call out the true essence of what's behind that, if there's pride or if there's like kind of like your 7 deadly sins or whatever it is, that vice on the other side of one of these feats, if their feat that they are hailed to or something with their name, you can cut them down by calling out or slandering, towards the vice attached that could be attached to that. I don't know.
Right.
There was my 2 cents.
So what I'm thinking, that I just want to kind of bring this back to where we are in the story. You have this group of men. They come from,
France.
Yeah, we're from France. The
They're from
Coneheads.
France.
We have these crusaders, and they are set in time, in a place, a historical setting, so to speak, and they've come through what appears to be kind of a portal and washed up on an alien shore, so to speak, because this is a society that is not based on anything that they understand. And then you have the Duke, just reprising from last episode, where part of what's going on is he's wondering whether or not this shipwreck was because he was kind of running away from his duty. And he is a bearer of what I didn't mention. If you had gone back and listened, he is a bearer of the keys, and the keys to the the manor and the whole complex back home, and then to the fortress and the place in the Holy Land that he is supposed to inherit. These keys that were wrought for these purposes, when joined together, formed probably the entrance to a portal to this strange new world, so to speak, and they're encountering now these people that have these attributes that we've been describing. But one of the things the Duke isn't real interested in having it come to light that this shipwreck was probably his fault, and that was due to his own disobedience and walking away from his destiny and hiding from his destiny, perhaps. And so now
Right.
he's in this place where, based on he's kept quiet about how much of their talk he actually understands. And so he is kind of by definition sort of wary about them, if I can use in the sense them knowing his name, because he does not want to be exposed and have that weakness exposed, right? I have a feeling that part of this naming and this seeking out, this fighting style has to do with uncovering a person's, physical weaknesses, certainly, but also his character weaknesses.
Right.
So he's probably feeling a little vulnerable and wanting to protect himself. And so this interaction is I just kind of wanted to bring it back to how this is gonna work here as far as what they're gonna do with each other, so to speak.
One of the things I remember we were talking about last week was what his house mantra was, like what his house motto was.
Yeah.
And I think it's like the name of the house. It's like our name is our, and it's a word that means pride, responsibility, and power, right? Because this family has known about this place, And so as he learns more, he's realizing more and more that maybe his whole family is actually from here.
Oh.
You know? And so the mantra for his house, which is supposed to be, it's like my word is my bond.
Right.
It's like name of the house, word is my bond, or and it's a thing you can say, who's coming. Oh, the Zephrons are coming. You can trust the name Zephron. Their word is their power. Mm-hmm. Their name is their power. If they're showing up, that means responsibility and reality is coming. I don't know. Yeah. That's the thing I thought of as you were bringing it back, because we had talked about that last week and I'd been thinking about what it could be. So
That's great. So I wonder if there's some more characters we should introduce here that could make a turn in the story. We've got the Duke. We've on the side of the emissary from the people who are indigenous to this land. We've got the three that came forward, and the one seems to be, involved in the magic system or the pantheon, the belief system, and clearly disturbed by the surprise of the horses. One of the elements that was drawn for this time was the famous person. Seth, did you say that you had an interest? You had an idea for that?
I do have, with what was being said, I've got an idea for this character. So one of the archers, so here's part of the twist. The guy that is, let's say, looks like the Baron,
right,
is not the Baron, or not the Baron, Duke, right? This is part of how he was trying to skirt from his responsibilities, right? The actual Duke has disguised himself as one of the archers.
Okay.
Right? Planning that when they got to the Holy Land, right, he was going to sulk off. Right? And maybe there's someone else, one of the other servants in his house. You know how they do that, have like a body double that then like as like a bodyguard kind of thing. And then they'll like wear the clothes. And so long as no one around knew that was not really the Duke, then they would just believe that it was the Duke.
Right.
Right. And so at first here, what we have is the Duke, at least the one that everybody thinks is the Duke, is not the Duke. He's just like the body double guard or the household, servant that he's put in that place so that basically he's paid him off. Basically, you can take my title and name, right? You come, we go to the Holy Land. No one there knows you. right? I'm just the son that no one there knows, right? Because I went off to the monastery priesthood or whatever, right? And you can have my life. And he was going to, sulk back off. But so he is disguised as one of the archers, and his name is Robert.
The Bruce.
Robert
Oh,
Lux.
okay. No.
No, Robert Lux, right? And this is where famous person would come in. His deeds and what he does become the legend of Robin of Locksley.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there you have your famous person, which then also keeps it in where, a lot of kind of some of what he can do doesn't have to exactly be the Robin Hood story or anything like that, but he becomes, and another idea just popped in my head, perhaps like when they find out like what this place is called, maybe like they call this place Sherwood, which is ironic because there's no woods, right? Mm-hmm. Or something close to that.
No.
Right, which then
Sherwood. That's a name for wood. So he makes a bow out of Sherwood. He's Robert Locks of the Sherwood, of the bow that won't break, because it's sure. You're sure that this wood won't break.
Yeah, no, my mind was going like when they go and hide in Sherwood Forest, right? That was actually, or maybe his father was, the character we might know as Robin Hood, or like his grandfather or something. I don't know. It doesn't have to go there, but it makes better sense for the name thing for him to be that of Sherwood, because of his bow. But anyways, that brings up then for your famous person, where that's let's say our famous person, right, is kind of this Robin Hood character, Robert Lux, as it would be, and perhaps that's what they call the Baron, but of course he's under hiding. Maybe as Robin Hood.
So the
right?
guy pretending to be the Duke would be like the captain of the guard, but the couple of the two guys that are the barons, which would be the other quote unquote nobility of this crew, and then the men at arms, they're all in on. They obviously know each other, so they are all in on the ruse, right?
Maybe just the guy. I mean, my initial thought is that, none of them were, except for the guy placing at, perhaps like the other two barons were just like a couple other barons that were catching this boat, right? And maybe it was like one of the nicer boats because that's where it was on the Duke's boat, mm-hmm. right? And so it was kind of like the, cruise liner of, crusade ships. And maybe that's why there's like a lot fewer troops or a lot fewer people, because then it would just be like kind of the few personal like retinue of these barons. So like you have them where there's like maybe two of the archers are kind of like the archers that go along with the barons, right?
Yeah.
And then that's why maybe, right? And then he's the archer that's connected to the Duke. Yeah, right. And then all the other troops were like the 5 or 6 kind of like bodyguards or some of their initial retinue.
Yeah, so I'm thinking because this kid grew up away at school and now he is because of the whatnot, and he's supposed to go to the Holy Land and take control of the castle and fulfill his destiny, but nobody really knows for sure. So he was able to pull off this thing with the help of his friend, the pretend Duke, right?
Whose name is Richard,
correct?
Obviously, yeah. Writing down fake Duke is Richard. Yeah.
I mean, you think about it. What better name could he earn, or could it be revealed that he has on this island than Lionhearted?
Oh yeah, of course.
And if you think about the legend of Robin of the Hood and Richard the Lionhearted, Robin Hood comes back and then works to get the ransom for Richard, or to get the ransom, or to get the knowledge and the prowess and the information for how to go back and ransom, I'm making air quotes with my fingers, ransom Richard back. So I think we could almost see how the story is going to end with his first kind of servant and person he's kind of mean to, snobbish to, pretending to be him, and then eventually becomes his friend and then gets trapped or imprisoned on this island, and then he gets sent back, and then comes back from the, air quotes again, crusades, a changed man, and has to get a lot of metal together in order to send off to.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's kind of an interesting story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways,
Because I was thinking about that, like
there's
you think about where Britain is, and then you think about where the Holy Land is. That's like months of travel. Like,
Right.
who knows if they actually ever.
go to where the men speak Italian and then continue on until they speak something else.
Who knows if they could have gotten up to tons of hijinks, these people going on crusades. It's like they've never been to the Holy Land. They come across an alien city full of people they don't understand.
And they make
just,
up a whole story about it.
yeah, they kill them and they take back stuff and they go, we went to the crusades.
Yeah.
Well, they weren't speaking French, German, or English, so or Spanish. So that must have been the Muslims.
Exactly. My thought is that it's an island, and on the other, they find out that on the other side of the island is a door, or a cave, or a something, right? So I was kind of thinking like what's their reason? What's the reason for the story to go forward? You know, because they can't live here. We've established that their legend has to leave the island at some point. You know, my thought is that there was there's a door that people say is made of metal, you know, and the only thing that they think that they can do, you know, the Duke kind of understands some of this. He has a key. The door's locked. This is legend on the island. The door's locked, you know, but it has a keyhole. It has a hole that's shaped in the same way that the key is shaped. Okay, so he's got to like get them. He has to convince Richard to pretend to be the Duke and convince the barons to travel across this land and try the key in the door, right?
So how did they know about this quest? I mean, do the people there, do they talk with the people there to find out that there's this, is there some sort of legend around this among the people that live there? How does this process go forward as far as their discovery of this quest?
I mean, I would say, you know, right now, as far as this, we've done a lot of building how the story should go or would go, but right now we're still on the beach, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So how I imagine it going forward is some rudimentary kind of communication takes place, you know? It's still not yet revealed that the archer is Robert and Richard isn't, Richard isn't Robert. Richard is Richard, you know, that the Duke, it's not yet revealed. And so there's a bit of lore dumping, right? They communicate a little bit. They get taken back to their city. And that's where kind of the first little bit, as, you know, someone gives someone a copper coin as a form of payment for a beer or something, and everything kind of like explodes. Like, you know, and then there has to be a language barrier. The language barrier has to break at some point, because it would be really difficult to write a story where they could never talk to the inhabitants. You know, it could be they're coming into the town and they see English or French or German or whatever written on the top of the gates, you know,
Yeah.
in some way. But if I had to storyboard it, I would say that happens. There's a bit of language breakdown. You know, there's a bit of language barrier that breaks down. You know, they practice enough back and forth that all of a sudden they can communicate, kind of, because it would take a couple of months in order to like learn a language. If we wanted to do that, that's fine. It's just hard without time jumps to really have them create a language, and then some external threat, you know.
So I think maybe that would be it. If the root of it is kind of a Latin thing, right? And perhaps it's because when you're talking about the door, I was half thinking, you know, perhaps this was like an unknown or like a secretive thing between whatever this house was, and maybe that's how they rose to power. Is so like when they had the Silk Road and everything.
Oh, right.
Right. If you use the one key, right, it would open the castle. But if you used it in the one door in the dungeon of their keep, right, it would open up to the door here on this island, right? And then you would take a boat, right? You would take a boat off the reef, and on like maybe a certain like
day of the year or something like that.
Day of the year, or then, however that would be, you then had to have the keys like hooked onto the rudder or something, right? And then it would activate, leaving the island, which then would bring you out on the other side of the Mediterranean, right? Close to the Holy Land. Right. And so basically it cuts your travel time down by like 90%, right? And then to get back, you steer into this direction and you would come into this island, right? Which only you would find and come into if you had like the keys, like stabbed into the ship. So maybe that happens. He's like playing with the keys, and as it's storming, it like gets stabbed into the ship, right? And then it then allows them to come up to this island, right?
Right.
And that's how, let's say, his family used to be able to get like copper and tin from, let's say, Britain or whatever it is, out to these other places, because then this, let's say, island that technically comes in and out midway in the Mediterranean, right? You could then go back up to Italy, like during the Roman times, or you could then, book it to the Holy Land, or then down to like kind of central in the Mediterranean. It cuts down your
travel time by months.
Cut down your travel time by a lot, right? So maybe that's part of what's going on.
I also kind of view it that these people on this island, how like so Leif Erikson and the Vikings first came to New Vinland, or, they came to the Americas. And then for how many hundreds of years, people were waiting for them, the white-faced, blonde-haired, blue-eyed gods, to come back. And then, Spaniards come back, and they're like, this is them. They're back. And they had all these legends about them and all this history about them. I kind of view that same sort of thing has taken place here. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's some time slippage, so more time has passed on the island than in the rest of the world. So they come back, they come to the island, they crash on the island, and then there's like, not prophecies, but there's like, they kind of know who these people are. No one on the island themselves have ever seen men dressed in half plate and mail, but they have drawings, and they kind of have this understanding of it, So there's also this kind of expectation, because there's warring factions on the island. There's, factions on the island as well, people who no longer sort of believe that these people are coming back. The island is kind of desolate, considering it has no trees, really. It has no metal. They can't really leave the island. They've never tried to leave the island. They don't have boats big enough. You think about soil that like lacks a lot of base mineral components. It would be difficult to like grow crops and like grow trees, really. Trees need a lot of minerals in the soil in order to like grow to any sort of maturity. So they do grow trees, and that's where Sherwood comes from, is they do try to grow trees, but they can't. So this guy who has this staff made of wood with symbols carved on it, this staff is made of Sherwood. It's like really valuable because it is wood, and that just goes along with the whole denseness economy of the entire island as well.
Right.
So
then what I'm thinking is some of these, the keepers of this kind of lore that have written down or have tradition of passing on the legend of these visitors, these strange visitors,
right?
Encounter them, and so then the quest to the far side of the island and the mysterious door comes up. Is that kind of where we're headed here?
Yeah, I feel like that's where we're headed. I think that next.
I have an idea for a villain if this might help kind of bring in an idea of where the tension comes. If that's all right, Reed.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so what I'm thinking is, so if these two other barons they're just other lords on their way there as well, right? Seeking fame, seeking glory. it's not a guarantee that they themselves are, I mean, they're the elite aristocrats. So, obviously they were just, peak people, right?
Right.
So that is who one of our villains are. And after seeing, and that's what my thought with the language thing was. So these people here, that's why they have bits of Latin. And so if someone starts speaking some of like the native, Frankish or, Anglo-Germanic, they've heard it. And so there's like bits where like, especially maybe the wise women who then can intuitize.
That's a
like,
great word, intuitize.
how that intuitize, they can intuitize it, how it's changed. And so maybe that's where a lot of the communication comes through with some of them. So they might be familiar with a lot of some of those words just because as people had traveled through. But then like that's how then they're able to kind of put together some of the words for the communication. But anyways, back to the idea for the villain would be he is one of these barons, and maybe it's both of them. Maybe he gets the other baron. I'm almost thinking in like a to set themselves up. It's like, oh, this metal thing, we could be kings here,
Oh yeah.
right? It doesn't matter what. It could be a plot of land in the the dump, but if they could be king of it, right? And so they start either one of them or both of them, and maybe the other one becomes kind of his sidekick, is maybe one of a lower baron, or maybe however that works. And so they start vying for basically trying to apprehend and put themselves, because very easily with their metal and their armor and their weapons, I mean, they could plow through everybody. Right? There's obviously all these gems. I mean, they'd be sitting like kings, right? I'm thinking of like that El Dorado thing where they go and then there's like gold and they're like, right? Sorry. But yeah, so that's where our villain comes in. And perhaps then, obviously then as they start like setting themselves up as these like king gods, right? They very easily, because then they bring basically half of the force that came with them on the beach, right? Two of the archers, maybe, or maybe the archers being of lower status, like maybe they don't go along with it, or I don't know. But they basically take nearly 2/3 or almost half of the force off the beach, right? And then who do the other people become? Well, they become Little John,
Will Scarlet.
Robin of the
Friar
Hood,
Tuck.
Will Scarlet, Friar Tuck, right? Right. So then they're trapped on this island, and for a while, maybe they're just like, they don't want to go along with this, right? Then he has to reveal he has these keys, then they figure it out. Then they get with, their little group that like goes off into like the, part of the island, and then they find the door, right? Maybe the keys get stolen, right? Maybe they get kind of captured because they're not going to go along with it, right? Because obviously if the one is a duke, right, they capture him, and so that's why he has to go back and get the ransom, right?
Right.
So they capture the duke and take him, and then, right, so if that makes sense. So the villain would be one of these lower barons that are under the duke, and then they try to subjugate this kind of land as their kingdom, right? Thus pushing, Robert Lux, and kind of some of the other people that would resist the kind of taking over of this power grab, right? Pushes them out into the outskirts of the wilds, and then they have to kind of get in, and then that's where they moved, and then they have to get through the door so they can get back.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think that let's not get too far, because then we won't have a reason for a third episode. But I like where this is going as a rough plot. Let's wait till next week to really flush it out the rest of the way, though.
That sounds like
Because I have some
Yeah.
interesting.
I just figured I'd add that so we had like the tension of a villain character.
Absolutely. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. If you liked this episode, if you thought it was entertaining and good, let us know. Send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Send us a Twitter message or an X message, whatever you want to call it, at @getsbettercast. Tune in next week for the fun and exciting conclusion of Crusader Metal Gods. And if you didn't like this episode, I would say just wait. It gets better. Bye.